I'm Rolene Marks. Welcome to Modiin and Beyond. Join me every Sunday between 3 and 4 on Radio Modiin as we take a look at what's happening in Modiin, Israel, and beyond. I'm Rolene Marks, and welcome to Modiin and Beyond on Radio Modiin. And apologies for the slight delay, but hey, sometimes we have gremlins and we make do the best way we know how. So I hope you all had a great fast and are all ready for a jam-packed show. I know I say this every week, but they just keep getting better and better. We're going to be speaking to Seidner from the Zahal Disabled War Veterans Organization. We're going to be finding out about our amazing veteran athletes. They've just come back from the Invictus Games in Dusseldorf. They do incredible things with sports rehabilitation. We're going to be finding out all about that. I'm then going to be crossing to the United Kingdom, speaking to the editor-in-chief of the Jewish Chronicle and the author of the brand new book, Israelophobia, Wallis Simons. And I can actually think of a few people who could do with a reading of that book. No names mentioned. Roger Waters. And finally, I have a real treat for you. Justine Zwerling will be speaking to us about food diplomacy. Hey, we're Jewish. There's nothing we love more than food. So keep it here with me, Rolene Marks, for Modiin and Beyond. All this and the best music. But with me on the line from the Zahal Disabled Veterans Organization is Seidner. Is in charge of project development. Boker Tov.
Boker Tov, good morning.
Shana Tova, Gmar Chatima Tova. I think it's going to be a great year. Now, I have been watching with immense pride over the last couple of months, and I think the veterans stole all our hearts with their performance at the Invictus Games in Dusseldorf just a couple of weeks ago. Tell us about Zahal Disabled Veterans Organizations.
Well, the organization was created in 1949, right after the War of Independence, by a group of wounded war veterans from that war. And it is a not-for-profit registered charity. Now, although it was quite clear even in those early days of the state that the government and the Ministry of Defense would take full responsibility for those who paid this immense price with their bodies and often their souls. Still, these wounded war veterans realized that together as an organization, they would probably know best what their needs would be. And indeed, there has been this synergy and collaboration over the years between the Ministry of Defense and the Zahal Disabled Veterans Organization. The Ministry of Defense is the one who determines what their disability percentage will be, but the moment they're released from the IDF, they basically come under the responsibility of the Zahal Disabled Veterans Organization, which is the sole legal entity responsible for the well-being of these veterans. And I think from the beginning, the goal of the organization was to, make sure that the rights of these veterans are upheld in the Knesset, that laws are enacted to protect them, but probably at the same time, and even more importantly, to give them the tools to regain their lives back, not become a burden to society or to their families, and help them. The road to rehabilitation is not, it doesn't end when they leave the hospital. It's a lifelong road. And the organization has spread itself throughout the country in district offices so that basically anywhere in the country, there will be somebody on behalf of the organization to help these new disabled veterans as they embark on a new road and a life-changing road. It's a very inclusive organization. It helps the families as well, not just the members. And it built very, very unique rehabilitation sports and recreation centers called Beit HaLochem. And in essence, at these centers, we can see the amazing work that is done through sport as a rehabilitation tool. So these centers exist in Tel Aviv, Haifa, Jerusalem, and Beersheba. A fifth one is being built in Ashdod. And we encourage the wounded veterans to come to these rehabilitation centers right out of rehab. We bring them sometimes for a first visit, still in a wheelchair, and encourage them to take part in some kind of sport activity. And we also encourage them to bring their family with them. Sometimes it's their parents, sometimes it's already their spouses and even their children, or even their girlfriends, who play an equally important part in the rehabilitation and oftentimes suffer just as much, if not more at times, because they find themselves quite alone, the families. So at Beit HaLochem, a wonderful support group is created, and these centers become sometimes a second home for many of our members. And once they become involved in sport, not only do they gain physical strength, but they start feeling confident again, and they feel better about themselves. Many of them actually move on to become professional athletes and start becoming enrolled in various frameworks like Paralympic Games or World Championships, European Championships. They are trained at the Beit HaLochem centers. We don't spare anything. I think we probably try and provide the best possible coaches and equipment. We do this by raising money from friends organizations around the world. The government, of course, are partners with us. They have helped us create a safety network to enable this tremendous rehabilitation network to take place. But a lot depends on our very good brothers and sisters in the diaspora who feel how important it is to contribute to the Zahal disabled veterans. So at Beit HaLochem, many disciplines of sport take place. Not only sport, there are also many cultural events, arts and crafts workshops. But to get back to the Invictus, then of course, sport as a rehabilitation tool is something that we have become very good at over the years. And many countries have actually sent delegations to learn from us.
Let's talk about that for a second, because it's not just the Invictus Games, it's also the incredible Veterans Games, which is unique or different rather to the Invictus Games, because their veterans don't have to qualify. They're all welcome.
Right.
And I think it's important to stress that some of these veterans, the wounds are on the inside. They suffer from tremendous post-traumatic stress, that sometimes the wounds that you see are not the physical, they're the mental as well. So tell us about both the Veterans Games and the Invictus Games, because our athletes have just been exceptional. We couldn't be more proud.
Well, in fact, the Veterans Game was a result of not being invited to the Invictus Games for several years, for various reasons, and I won't take up your time now to explain, but Israel could not be a member of the Invictus clubs because it wasn't part of the charter of the Invictus Games. So out of this frustration came the very wonderful initiative of our friends organization in the UK called Beit HaLochem UK, who came up with the idea to bring, once again, through private funding, through local sponsors in the UK, to bring a group of 70 UK wounded war veterans from different charities in the UK. There isn't one single umbrella organization in the UK, so they made a point to reach out, whether it was to the Royal Marines charity or Air Force or the Not Forgotten or various groups, create a selection process there and a registration process, and bring 70 veterans who were invited to bring their family along with them. So each veteran could bring up to, I believe, 2 family members, all paid for by the sponsorship monies, for a week long in Israel. where during this week, for part of the time, they are hosted by our Beit HaLochem centers, and they compete in friendly competitions against Nechei Tzahal, against Zahal disabled veterans in 3 branches. Power competitions, sort of like, I guess, swimming and shooting. And then the second part of the day, buses take them and their families to tour the country. So at the end of the day, what happens is, first of all, they are exposed to Israel for the first time. This is usually a first visit to all of them, and certainly their families. They meet their colleagues in Israel, the Zahal disabled veterans. They are exposed to the amazing rehabilitation program that takes place here, and they basically become the best goodwill ambassadors that we could ask for. They go back to the UK with this tremendous life-changing experience, because several of them have said over the years that coming here with their family enabled them and their families for the first time ever not only to be on a vacation together outside of the UK, but to talk openly about their wounds, their pain. Some of the wives and children have said they had never heard their husbands talk before about their injuries. So this is a wonderful result of the Veteran Games, and we have them now every year for 3 years, and hopefully they will continue in 2024. The Invictus Games last year in 2022, we received an invitation by the foundation in the UK that Israel had finally been admitted. It was actually a request of the German hosts, who were allowed to invite a few new countries to join. So they invited Israel, Nigeria, and Colombia, and we were delighted. We were given a quota of 20 athletes. The emphasis in the Invictus Games is not on winning medals. The emphasis there is on rehabilitation through sport, and the road to the Invictus Games is the long road of rehabilitation, where the Invictus Game is really the peak or the climax for all of those participating. They have had it now since 2014, and this time in Düsseldorf was the 6th time. Now, for us, of course, this is not the case, because we have our own spirit of Invictus, so to speak, every day at our organization. Our members know what it's like to rehabilitate through sport, but we're very honored and excited to be invited. And I think once we were there, we were actually quite humbled, because we realized how important these encounters are, to actually be together with another 21 delegations from so many other countries, to meet people with incredible stories of resilience and rehabilitation. It's true that the Iraqi delegation backed out when they heard Israel was coming. Well, it was their loss. On the other hand, we were at the same hotel with the Jordanian delegation. The Colombians, it was heartbreaking to find out the horrific injuries they have from the cartel. I mean, these are things that in our everyday lives, other than on TV series, we don't really encounter.
We can't even imagine. We can't even imagine this.
No. So the excitement was great. We chose 4 of the 10 branches of competition. We chose to compete in table tennis, swimming, cycling, and archery.
And excelled.
And table tennis, oddly enough, was added only this year by Germany, because the host country is allowed to add a new sport, because table tennis is the sport of the city of Düsseldorf. And how ironic that Israel won almost all of the table tennis medals, both in the doubles and in the singles, men and women. So it was really a very sweet, a really great feeling.
Incredible. Or Seidner from Zahal Disabled Veterans Organization. We're going to have to get you back for a longer interview. Is that a deal?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. And once again, Shana Tova to all
Shana
of your
Tova. We
well.
couldn't be more proud, more honored, and we're going to have to get you back. And anytime that our athletes have something to tell us, an event they want to promote, please be in touch with us. That was Aura Seidner.
Thank you very much.
Project development for the Zahal Disabled Veterans Organization. Please check out Zahal Disabled Veterans Organization. The link is below, as well as Beit Halochem. Coming up after a very short break, we're going to be speaking to Jake Wallis Simons.
All the stories have been told of kings in days of old, but there's no England now. All the wars that were won or lost somehow don't seem to matter very much anymore. All the lies we were told, all the lives of the people running around their castles and burned. How I see change, but inside we're the same as we ever were. Living up tonight, tell me now, what are we supposed to do? Living up tonight, tell me now. Living on a thin line. Tell me now, what are we supposed to do? Now we're another century nearly gone. What are we gonna leave for the earth? What we could do or what we wouldn't do, it's a choice, but does it matter? Does it matter much? Does it matter much to you? Does it ever really matter? Yes, it really matters. Living on a thin line. Ooh, tell me now, what are we supposed to do? Hello? Living on a thin line. Ooh, tell me now, what are we supposed to do?
The Kinks and Living on a Thin Line. I'm Rolene Marks. This is Modiin and Beyond on Radio Modiin. And just a reminder, if you have an event that's upcoming or you want to advertise, please be in touch with us via our website at www.radiomodiin.co.il. And I have to apologize to our next guest for the slight delay, but I've been looking so forward to speaking to him. This is Jake Wallis Simons. He is the editor-in-chief of the Jewish Chronicle and the author of Israelophobia, the newest version of the oldest hatred. Jake, welcome. We speak often on Modiin and Beyond about anti-Semitism and its various iterations, and how this irrational longest hatred kind of metastasizes into different versions over the years. Now, you have written a book called Israelophobia. I can think of many people who need to read it post haste. What inspired you to write this?
Well, thank you for having me on. I think, as you pointed out, anti-Semitism takes on different forms. It's the ultimate shapeshifter. If you rewind to the Middle Ages, it was largely a religious-driven hatred. Christians hated Jews because they were the killer. They were seen as the killers of Christ, and Muslims hated Jews because they were seen as the infidels. But if you fast forward then to the 20th century, Jews were hated, certainly in Europe, because they were seen as an inferior breed, a subhuman race, and Hitler wanted to exterminate them on that basis. So the thinking had changed, the hatred had changed to adopt pseudoscience, which was more popular at the time. But now that those things have been debunked, religion, certainly in the West, is declining, and the sort of race-based hatred of the 20th century is now largely taboo. Anti-Semitism has moved on to weaponize a new set of words and ideas, and that is to inhabit the political realm, to hate Jews because of their nation state. So whereas you can no longer say, I hate Jews, or I can't stand Jews, I stand against Jews, you can say, I stand against Zionists. I'm an anti-Zionist, I oppose Zionists, and all the rest of the rhetoric that we're familiar with. And so I think these thoughts were in my mind. It's an idea that the late Rabbi Jonathan Sachs had come up with some years ago. And then 2021 happened, when Israel was in conflict with Hamas in Gaza. And I was struck by how in London there was a rally of 180,000 people in Hyde Park in response to the killing of 256 Palestinians in that conflict. By comparison, the Syrian civil war had passed the grim milestone of 500 million deaths. There was, and that wasn't even the world's worst humanitarian crisis. According to the UN, the world's worst humanitarian crisis at the time was in Yemen, where 10,000 children had been killed or were badly injured and were being pushed into malnutrition, and most of the country was veering into poverty and catastrophe. And yet it was the 256 deaths in a defensive war by a democracy that had animated people's passions to the extent that they wanted to take to the streets in their hundreds of thousands. And not only that, but also to engage in the grossest expressions of the basest Jew hatred. We had people driving through Jewish areas of London with megaphones shouting about how they wanted to rape Jewish daughters. We had gangs patrolling back streets shouting they want the Zionists, they want their blood, and so on. And so it really was clear to me that idea of Israelophobia being the new anti-Semitism was a very live problem that was plaguing us today. And I wanted to try to anatomize it and clarify the debate for people.
Yeah, because nothing says free Palestine quite like, let me rape your, bring me your Jewish woman, let me rape your woman. Now take us through the process, because you have immense experience as a security writer. Today you are the editor-in-chief of the Jewish Chronicle. Listeners, if you aren't reading the Jewish Chronicle, please check them out. I think it's at the www.jc.com. Am I correct there?
It's actually the JC.
The JC.
But I'm sure you'd find it either way. Yeah.
But a routine read for me every single morning. Take us through the process of writing Israelophobia.
Well, I mean, it began with the concept. The concept was that we had these, until I began to talk about Israelophobia. I mean, look, I wasn't the first person to think of the word Israelophobia, but it wasn't in common parlance. We really had just two words. We had anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. And anti-Semitism is really linked in people's minds to race-based hatred, which means that if you're expressing this insane, obsessive, swivel-eyed hatred of Israel, and then somebody says to you, you're anti-Semitic, then the response is, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm only anti-Zionist. Here are my hard left, eccentric, fringe Jewish friends who agree with me, therefore I cannot be anti-Semitic. As if, the price to pay for not being called anti-Semitic is to find yourself a couple of hard left Jewish friends. And so that was the one word that was, it's difficult, to pin people down on that. But then the other term, anti-Zionism, people often don't feel any sense of shame in anti-Zionism. They say, well, yes, I am anti-Zionist, and that's a reasonable philosophical position and political position. I'm proud of it because Israel is an ethno-nationalist, genocidal, white supremacist, colonialist state. So therefore, I'm correct in being anti-Zionist. And in saying that, they really miss the point. I mean, they miss 2 points. The first point they miss is that it's one thing for a woman and her husband to debate having an abortion before a baby is born, but it's quite another to debate killing the child once it's 5, 10, 15, or 75 years old, as in the case of Israel. The other thing they miss is that all of those ideas on which they often base their anti-Zionism, that Israel is genocidal, white supremacist, colonialist, and so forth, are all lies. They are all historical and factual untruths. How can Israel be white supremacist when more Israelis are non-white than are white? How can Israel be a genocidal state when the Palestinian population has increased 5-fold since Israel's establishment? How can Israel be a colonialist state when quite clearly, according to the history, it is a post-colonial state? And so, but these two terms, anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, were both insufficient to capture and pin down and isolate what we're really talking about, which is this bigotry and hatred, this irrational bigotry and hatred towards the world's only Jewish state. And so I felt that introducing the word Israelophobia was a way that we could begin to talk about what we want to talk about, which is that hatred.
Now, you've had some tremendous responses. I follow you on, I think it's called X now. I call it Twix because I'm so confused. You've had some phenomenal feedback from people who have read the book and have been able to identify that maybe they have been carrying some degree of Israelophobia and have willingly owned it. Can you share some of those stories with us? I mean, I can think of a laundry list of people who I think need to read your book. Maybe let's start with Mark Ruffalo and move on to Roger Waters, and maybe throw in a Susan Sarandon or two. But you have had a tremendous response from people.
Yeah, one of the sad things about my book is that I think there are many more people who need to read it than who don't need to read it. But yes, I have had the book's only been out for a handful of weeks. And I have had a couple of quite detailed emails from readers describing how listening to me on podcasts or reading the book has caused them to reflect and realize that they've been infected by this virus of Israelophobia, which is this mutated anti-Semitism. And it's interesting, when I was writing the book, the people I really wanted to talk to were the people in the middle, particularly on the soft left, on the left side of politics, where you tend to have a greater amount of Israelophobia. I didn't want to talk to the people so much who agree with me. I mean, it's great to, as they say in politics, energize the base. And I didn't really see much point in talking to people who hated Israel so much that they would just ignore the book or try to burn it, as many people have threatened. But I was really interested in the majority, in the people in the middle, because I think that because of the virulence of Israelophobia emanating by the real ideologues who are largely on the left in Britain and Europe, but also on the hard right, particularly in the States and some other countries, because of the virulence of that narrative, it tends to poison the mainstream, so that people on the left in particular tend to just, they're reasonable, they don't have a dog in the fight, they're not bigoted in any way, but generally the narrative they're surrounded by is that Israel is the bad guy, is the evil one. And ideas like genocide, colonialism, white supremacy are in such common currency that they can easily just assume that that's how things are. But at least two readers have found that when they've engaged with the book and looked at my exposition of the oldest hatred in the newest form, they've began to have a long night of the soul and come out the other side where they thought, what, I have taken on some of those ideas. They're not justified, and I'm going to change the way I see things.
That's quite extraordinary, because that's essentially what you want. You want those, on the left, kind of middle of the range in their opinions, to really, really understand why we are so upset by these accusations that Israel is a colonialist, white supremacist, Zionist entity that shouldn't exist, because there is that line between legitimate criticism of policies of the government of Israel, that's our national sport here in Israel, and saying that we as Jews have no right to organize ourselves politically, call it Zionism, and return to our ancient ancestral homeland. Now, Jake, I know that you have a hectic day ahead of you. Tell us where we can find your podcast and where we can buy the book.
Sure. Well, I mean, just one final point that just occurred to me after what you just said is that I just like to make clear that I'm not trying to repress any criticism of Israel. On the contrary, all I'm doing is saying that when you're criticizing Israel in terms that include white supremacy, genocide, colonialism, apartheid, all of those demonstrable untruths, then you're tipping into Israelophobia. And we've seen recently that some Jewish voices have taken that on as well, but perhaps that's another discussion. You can find me on X/Twitter if you would like to. Jake W. Simons is my handle on that. On Facebook, of course, sort of on Instagram. It's not really my sort of thing. The podcast-wise, so the Jewish Chronicle is the paper. Some of your readers may be familiar with some of our reporting. We're the world's oldest Jewish paper, and certainly the largest, both digitally and in print, in the United Kingdom and in Europe. And podcast-wise, we have a Jewish Chronicle podcast called Let's Talk, the Jewish Chronicle podcast. So you can find that online if you want to as well.
And the JC breaks a lot of very, very interesting stories that are a must read. Jake, we're going to have to get you back on Modiin and Beyond. I'd like to have that conversation with you sometimes about why we have Jews who buy into the Israelophobia. But thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me this morning. We're going to take another short music break on the other side of this. What is food diplomacy? Hey, we're Jews. There's nothing more than that we love than eating.
אם היה לי כל הכסף בעולם, הייתי בן זונה מוגזם. קונה עיתון קורא לו הון וסגנון, ובא להופעות על הפריון, מרוקן את האלכוהול. רוצה אותו בטוקיז, מלא אותו באייביאן, מים מפריז, עושה הכל בשכל, משדרג את הדגל, מחליף את המגן דוד בסמל של שקל. שנוסע לו באוטו פלסטיק, תיק פנטסטיק, איש אלסטי, חברות, חדר כושר, רגע אושר, קש בבית, ערמות, בייבי בדי, אניבדי, קרם זהב וחביות, חדר חושך, רגע יושר, חיבוקים ונשיקות. בא לי מוגזם, תן לי להרגיש את הצבעים את הטעם, תן לי להרביץ לברזל כשזה חם, עוד פעם ועוד פעם, 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 פעם. ועוברות של ביטחון, וכמה זה מרגיש נכון, מוגזם, ואם אתה גם, בא לי שהלילה לא נלך לישון. תאסוף אותי באוטו פלסטיק, תיק פנטסטיק, איש אלסטי, חברות, חדר כושר, רגע אושר, קש בבית, ערמות, בייבי בדי, אניבדי, קרם זהב וחביות, חדר חושך, רגע יושר, חיבוקים ונשיקות. פלסטיק, תיק פנטסטיק, איש אלסטי, חברות, חדר כושר, רגע אושר, קש בבית, ערמות, בייבי בדי,
I'm Rolene Marks. That was Ivry Leder. I got so distracted by my fabulous guest who has joined me into the studio. I've been dying to get her in. I've been nagging her, and I can be an epic nag. I'm so delighted to have my good friend Justine Zwerling from Shorecapital Market and the UAE Business Council. We're going to be talking about all things wonderful, like food diplomacy and how we are building relationships, people to people, between Israelis, Emiratis, and Bahrainis. Justine, a huge welcome to you.
Thank you for having me, Zahal.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. Now, you are involved in so many aspects of peace building. You know, I'm a firm believer that contracts, agreements are signed by politicians, but peace is built between people from the ground up. And one of the things we as Jews love, well, as Middle Easterners, we love, and that is to eat. And food has played a massive role in diplomacy. What is food diplomacy?
Well, a friend of mine calls it gastro diplomacy, I'd say. And I think, when just before the peace was signed, we at the UAE Israel Business Council knew that, and we formed a council with great excitement because we knew how important and how epic this was all going to be. But I cannot actually explain how epic and incredible it was. And part of that movement was to talk to people and communicate through food. So we had these incredible journeys where the first huge packs of bamba and bisli and all the Israeli treats were brought to the Emirates, given out. And each time I went, I would bring a suitcase of clothes and a suitcase of food. So through that massive excitement about this is our future, it was about let's taste our goodies together, and the Emirati goodies and the Israeli goodies. And it created this huge vibe of excitement to explore each other's cultures.
Now, when you talk about exchanging food, what are the kinds of foods Emiratis share with us?
Always incredible. We had incredible meals together. We cook together. So we have makloob and all different types of incredible dishes, the breads, the cheeses. And so all of this was done together. Also challah baking, because all the Emiratis are very curious about this special bread, the plaited bread. So we brought over flour from Israel and baked together.
Because that is how we connect. There's two things I believe that really, really connect people. One is sports.
Absolutely.
And one is food. And, we are women. And if there's one thing, and I know there are many men out there who cook and who bake, but if there's one thing that's a language that all women speak, that is our ability to feed our families, to cook together, to connect on that level. Now, what kind of events have you hosted? Because I'm getting hungry just thinking about them.
Wow, I'm also hungry too, so let's eat virtually. So we had the first Crembo party, and it was all of this happened in the height of Corona. So as you know, we were all either locked down or on Zooms, etc. And all these beautiful things happened when people were the most stressed. So I think the food diplomacy, the sports diplomacy, and the women's forum that we built gave such great hope to everyone. So we had the first Crembo party in Dubai.
What is a Crembo party?
One of our snacks, as you know, is Crembo. Not very easily transportable, I must say.
A bit squishy.
Very tasty. So I managed to transport about, I think it was about 80 Crembos over to Dubai, and we arranged a party. Actually, the person who arranged it with me was my Emirati friend, and everybody came with all their colours and all of their excitement, and sat down and ate Crembo. So some people were eating Crembo upside down, inside out. We had all these different, How do you eat a crembo?
How do
Rolene?
I eat a crembo? Okay, this is a process. First of all, you eat the top, the cap of the crembo. Then, of course, you eat all the marshmallow out, then the chocolate, and then the cookie, or what we would call the biscuit on the bottom. Or you freeze it, and you have frozen crembo. How do you eat a crembo?
Have to say, I do it a bit like my friend Michelle Devon. I kind of just take a bite, and it's all very messy, but lovely.
The messier, the better. And what was the response by Emiratis to eating, the snacks that we take for granted? Bamba, bisli, crembo.
There was just so much excitement. Obviously, the Bamba and Bisley made it to the party as well as the crembos. But when I invited people, I said, we're having a crembo party. There's not one person that said, no, can't make it.
It's amazing how food will do that. Food, and as I've learned on this show, whiskey will get people coming every time.
But then we also had, the exchanging of recipes. So between the women, as we were building the forum and the closeness, the food really, and obviously beauty tips as well. Emiratis have the best beauty tips.
Oh, tell me, I do loves me a beauty tip.
They have so many. I don't know where to start. But I think, the most important thing is their posture and taking care of their skin, drinking a lot of water, and olive oil is used as well. And there's a lot of really nice camel products.
Camel products?
Yes.
The milk of the camel, what?
Both milk, but then there's camel soap, there's camel shower wash, there's all these beautiful products. Next time I go, I'll bring you some.
Who would have thought beauty products from a camel? But this is the beauty about, pun intended, about learning about each other's cultures. Is you do learn this. Now, you shared a really beautiful story with me when we were chatting the other day, and it involves rocks.
Yes. So when after the peace was signed, I decided, that's it, I'm going, but I'm not going just myself, I'm going with my kids. And it was the deep, dark days of Corona. So we flew through Greece. And when we got to Dubai, I took out the swimming bag, which was very heavy. And I said, girls, what do you have in the swimming bag? And they're like, oh, mummy, we brought the rocks from Israel. So my girls had collected about 20 different rocks, really beautiful, sparkly ones. And so when I'd go to meetings with the Emiratis and give them the gifts, I'd end it by saying, this came with us by accident, but this is a part of my country.
Oh, beautiful.
And that started an enormous closeness, that really touched them. And all it was a small rock, but actually it's part of our country.
What do you think Israelis should understand when it comes to interacting, doing business or socializing with our Abrahamic brothers and sisters? What should we learn about the culture that would help us in good stead?
Great question. So first of all, the Emirati culture is extremely deep. There are many different books that I can recommend to anyone who's interested, and podcasts. But the most important thing is they're not like us Duracell bunnies who just want to cut that business deal and make it happen. They want to know, who are you? Who's your family? Can I meet your family? And it's a deep, deep, deep relationship. So it's not a transactional culture. It's really about building. And then from there, the business comes. So I think Israelis naturally, work at a very, very fast pace. But what they need to do is realize, immerse yourself, learn about this beautiful culture, interact and be respectful, and take your time and enjoy the journey.
I think that's a lesson for all of us, because we tend to want those business deals now. We are, as you say, so transactional, and sometimes for other cultures, I know coming from the African culture, it comes at you like a ton of bricks. And as you say, this is about building relationships. This is about building trust. Let me know your families. And you've also been involved. I mean, you're involved in so many beautiful peace building projects. You're the ultimate peace builder, in my opinion. But you've been involved talking about sports diplomacy in something very, very special with a very special runner.
Yeah, so my brother, who's much more beautiful than I, Avi Solomon, he's an Ethiopian blind runner. He lives in Bet Shemesh. He trained with his trainer and a full team for about a year to run the Abu Dhabi Marathon, the full marathon, blind guy. And we went over there and we were welcomed. I've never had a welcome in my life like that, nor has Avi. The Emiratis were with us. We had dinner at their houses. They were with us all the time throughout the whole thing, at the start line, at the finish line, waving flags and supporting him. And Avi Solomon and his trainer, Lior, they came 62nd place out of 12,000 people, and he was the only blind runner.
That is incredible. And I think I remember reading a story about the Emirati ambassador running with him one day, which really, really moved me. I thought that was such a beautiful gesture.
It was so incredible because I called the officers and I said, could we have the ambassador's blessing, please? And they said, he doesn't just want to bless him, he wants to meet with him and run with him.
Oh, that's special.
Yeah, beyond.
What other projects are coming up that you can share with us or would like to share with us, or maybe anecdotes that we haven't heard? Because, we're so inundated at the moment with such negative news that we could do with a huge dose of positivity.
Okay. Well, first of all, Avi's coming back to the Emirates. He'll be coming and running the 21 kilometers in January in Dubai. In Dubai, I call it, not Dubai. So anyone who wants to get involved and support, give me a shout. Then we've also got quite a few women's gatherings coming up, which are really extremely special, not large, always small, so that you can really get to know each other. And then we've got some really exciting initiatives, obviously, in the business and finance, but we're talking about food right now, so I'll leave it there.
What is the one recipe you love sharing with our Emirati sisters?
So it's funny because I actually cook very Middle Eastern. So I'll cook Moroccan chicken, Persian cutlets, etc., etc. So actually, when we pulled the recipes together, they're all very, very similar. They're just different names. But I would say they do like a good Ashkenazi chicken soup.
Jewish penicillin, what can we say? Jewish penicillin, chicken soup with matzo balls. I would love to share my recipe with them because I make it proper like in the old country, Eastern Europe, no broth, big chunks of chicken, big clumps of matzo balls. Can I share my secret with you?
Yes, please.
The secret to a good matzo ball. Are you listening, people?
Very much.
Don't boil it in water. Boil it in your soup so that it takes on the flavor of your chicken soup. And as we say, Jewish penicillin is the cure for everything. And it turns out, you heard it right here, Jewish penicillin, the great bridge builder.
Thank you so much, Rolene.
Justine Zwerling, what a treat to have you in studio. Please come back more often and share stories from the Abraham Accords, because we see the memorandums of agreement in the news and it's all wonderful, but we want to know about the people. We want to know all about the community. And my favorite peace builder sitting right here, Justine Zwerling. Thank you so much for being here. A huge thank you to everybody out there for your patience as we experience slight delays. A big thank you to today's guests, Seidner from Zahal Disabled Veterans Organization. Please support our incredible veterans doing amazing things on the sporting front. Jake Wallis Simons, buy his book, Israelophobia. Hey, maybe even send it to Roger Waters. Heaven knows he could do with a read. A massive thank you to the beautiful Justine Zwerling from Shorecapital Market and the UAE Business Forum, and a huge, big toda rabba to Pe'er Atia behind the scenes, making sure everything runs smoothly and I don't panic myself into a disaster. And a big thank you to you, the listeners. Join me again next Tuesday morning, 10 a.m., Modiin and beyond, right here, Radio Modiin.
If you don't wanna see me, did a full 180, crazy, thinking about the way I was. Did the heartbreak change me? Maybe, but look at where I ended up. I'm all good already, so moved on. It's scary, I'm not where you left me at all. So, if you don't wanna see me dancing with somebody, if you wanna believe that anything can stop me, don't show up, don't come out, don't start caring about me now. Walk away, you know how. Don't start caring about me now. Aren't you the guy who tried to hurt me with the word goodbye? Though it took some time to survive you, I'm better on the other side. I'm all good already, so moved on. It's scary, I'm not where you left me at all. So, if you don't wanna see me dancing with somebody, if you wanna believe that anything can stop me, don't show up, don't come out, don't start caring about me now.